Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's session on navigating US tariffs and safeguarding India's manufacturing growth, where we will discuss the direct and indirect impact of the potential US reciprocal tariffs and the long term implications for the Indian manufacturing sector. So, we will also analyze today how India can capitalize by attracting investment, scaling production, and boosting exports to the US as well as other countries. So I have with me the expert speakers of the session today, Mr. Ravi Raghavan, who is the managing director of BFW, who will represent the Indian manufacturing industry, Mr. Vinod Kumar Pathak, who is the Indian manufacturing sector head at PwC. So just to give you the some background on this topic, uh, as you know, the US President Donald Trump's recent announcement of sweeping tariffs and on nearly all the trading partners of the US is creating major disruption in the global trade. Imports from India were tariffed at 26% earlier, which is currently down to 10%, a flat rate that the American president announced for all the countries in a 90-day pause, with the exception of China. Now, considering China, the world's two largest economies are now engaged in a punishing trade war, in which the US president has imposed tariffs reaching to 145% on many of the Chinese products, and China, in return, has retaliated with 125% duties on imports from the United States. But overall, if you see, although the tariffs present new challenges, India's strategic positioning, diversified manufacturing base, and active trade diplomacy, they suggest that the country could navigate this phase without major disruptions. How? We will discuss that in today's panel discussion. So let's talk about it with our speakers. I will first start with Mr. Ravi Raghavan. So, Mr. Raghavan, how will the new tariffs announced recently by the US government reshape India's position in the global trade in the short term as well as long term, especially in comparison to other countries like China and Vietnam?
There are 2 points to it. One is the short term, and I don't look at it from a tariff point of view, a value or a number to that. But what the whole issue of tariff that's being talked about is going to sort of create an uncertainty, a loss of trust, a lot of uh, disbelief in certain things, because manufacturing, like unlike other things, takes a long time. If we have to set up a factory, we have to think about a policy change that is stable, that continues for 10 years, etc. So my guess is people will wait, which people are doing. People are going to be cautious, but people are not going to take decisions which are going to be a long-term decision. For example, setting up something new factory in an untested area just to take benefit of a tariff, right? Earlier, we all used to have this as a major element in our calculation in tariff, right? Tomorrow, probably that would not be the main thing. A less risky decision would take priority over that. Second, I believe that just after COVID, let's take an example. It was not tariff, but there was a huge cost increase because of the logistics about the sea shipments, etc. And it pained for a few months, maybe a year, but then we all absorbed. It's not come down to the pre-COVID era, but all of us have absorbed, worked on alternates, and come to bringing the business to back to normal. So I guess that's what is going to happen. Initially, we are a little concerned, but after a few months or a year, it may go back to business as normal.
So, Vinod, I would like to ask you, as Mr. Raghavan already mentioned, there will be some indirect impact, and the manufacturers have to take into consideration the current situation, which was probably their similar situation after COVID as well. So, what do you think would be the direct and indirect economic consequences for Indian manufacturers, and which industries do you think are most vulnerable in this case?
No, thank you for the question, Shekhar. I think, the impact will vary across industries, right? There's some of the industries which will be highly resilient, like, pharmaceutical, electronics, etc. But there are industries like, textiles, engineering goods, etc., which are already facing the brunt of this because, I think they have been operating at a certain cost structure. If the certain imposition brings a disadvantage, that's I think that's a big thing. So I think it will be widespread in some ways. But at any time, I think this also presents a significant opportunity for companies to look at two critical aspects. One is their own cost structure, right, vis-a-vis the competition in the global arena. And second, look at the supply chains overall. And these two things would, need a complete relook for companies if they are going to take advantage of the demand from USA and other countries in the absence of a Chinese import, right? Second, I think from the internal standpoint, I think in order to gain advantage of this, one should not forget that there would be dumping of excess capacity from the countries which are most impacted by these tariffs, right? So I think you can't rule out China, Vietnam, etc., putting and that anyways. But that again goes to the point of still it makes sense for you to look at your cost structures in a more holistic manner. And the third, which is less evident today in the world and is not talked about a lot, but through my interactions with the industry leaders, our clients, etc., the other aspect is if you have got a supplier base of Indian companies in India, the current situation presents a great opportunity for them to export to other countries, which means there is a huge supply chain disruption that is possible within the country itself in terms of the supplies and time, which limits their capacity to serve, or the cost that the Indian companies or suppliers will charge to their, count Indian manufacturers, which may significantly increase. So I think this third dimension also needs to have a significant impact in some of the key segments, especially the ones which are more complex kind of sectors like engineering goods and others. Net, I think the two things of cost revamp and supply chain assessment from a global standpoint would be most critical for companies to both take advantage of the opportunities as well as thwart the threat of dumping as well as supply disruptions coming out of this initiative. Check over to you.
Sure. Maybe I will continue with that, what you said. As Mr. Raghavan also mentioned about the expansion plans and other diversifications. So how do these tariffs influence this long-term investment decisions and industrial expansion, especially for Indian companies?
Yeah. No, I think, see, as Mr. Raghavan also mentioned, I think these are long-term implications. And honestly, I think a lot of companies are still seeing how things are going to expand because, there are multiple views. All of us know, right? And what the predictability of policy decisions from the United States is to say the least, is a bit unpredictable also in terms of what happens after the period of 9 days, etc. My sense is this will be a game of wait and watch as far as the capacities are concerned. I don't think companies will jump into pumping a lot of money in terms of building new capacity on the back of what has happened right now. But look at ways in which they can optimize their current operations and supply chain, and also the market distribution and marketing network in the situation while keeping an eye on these plans and doing a bit of simulation on the long term. I think capacity simulations would be very, very critical. Taking a decision out of those simulations is something that can happen after a period of, let's say, 3 to 6 months, depending on how the situation pans out.
Mr. Raghavan, as you earlier mentioned, after COVID, there was certain pause in the investment and expansion plans. But thereafter, there was a slight increase. And after that, again, it started increasing very fast. There were lots of companies announced their investments and expansion plans, especially the last 3 years. So do you think these recent changes in the global trade will hamper those decisions and the company will hold back their investment plans or maybe partially invest in expanding their businesses or diversification their businesses?
No, will not. What I said is they will rethink and re-strategize. Again, the 2 points came in, I think Mr. Patak also mentioned. The difference on tariff gives an advantage to India, right? So compared to if the same numbers or similar numbers, similar proportion goes continues after 90 days. The guess is we may have an advantage of tariffs, so that's a positive, right? But people, for example, if somebody was trying to put up a plant in Mexico and serve US, may have to look at what would be the decision and then rechange their strategies. If there's direct export from India to US, maybe a different phenomena. But there are a lot of Indian companies who have presence in other regions and export to US, right? So they will probably have to restructure depending upon what happens. At this point, our exports to US is pretty low compared to, say, a China. So definitely a differential of the tariff between both these countries will add to a positive for India. So net, I feel it is going to be a gain for India, but initial period of uncertainty would always be there. But all these have put in a thought that tomorrow in US, if some decision is taken, people will think twice, wait for some time. Earlier, people would believe in those decisions, go ahead, and that these decisions are going to stay for some time, so they could take a policy decision. Now they will want to take a second look, wait for some time, and be sort of thoughtful about all those all those decisions going future. I believe that global supply chain phenomena as such, which people believed so much, may get a hit little bit. That's what my general feel is.
For all these things to take into consideration the other aspects apart from investing in new facilities, we also need to attract investment, scaling up production, and of course boosting exports to not just US but also to other countries. So for overall safeguarding the manufacturing growth of India, how do these other factors help to achieve our objective? Or individual companies, we can say, any company must have decided of some investment plans probably last year, and because of this tariff and other trade consequences, which is hampering the global supply chains. So, what are the other factors that you feel will help Indian manufacturing to safeguard its growth?
Probably we will also have to look at other regions more seriously. US till now, let us agree that it was an easy country to deal with. Probably the understanding, the language, communication, the way of doing business was much easier to do business. So probably we may have to look at other regions which were difficult and were not in our priority to do for various reasons. And they may not be able to give that scale that US was giving immediately. But that is one thing that all industries have started looking at. Whomever we speak to, our customers have also started looking at supplying to other places which were not in their priority. But all of them are looking at reasons to utilize their capacity as much as possible. The big, it's for companies who had a huge proportion of their production for exports, who are getting impacted differently than people who had lesser proportion of their production to export. So people are rebalancing their domestic to export proportion, etc.
So, Vinod, do you think what kind of other factors which industry has to take into consideration to safeguard their manufacturing growth?
No, I think two parts. One, if I take a macro view of things, I think the opportunity of arising out of this is also the individual trade agreements that are happening currently. Like, for example, even with the US, the trade negotiation is really looking like it will be favorable for both the countries. And the FTAs with other countries like UK, we just concluded, and I think it's very clearly showing that there are free trade agreements impacting the import duties. Likewise for EU, it's ongoing. New Zealand, Oman, ASEAN countries. What I'm trying to say is that instead of looking at it in a macro view, I think it has to be also looked at at individual country view, taking advantage of the tariff arrangement from FTAs, and be looking at the comparative cost advantages that India would have with respect to those countries. So this is going to be those companies which can take advantage of this and look for alternate export markets, right, will really reap the benefits of this at the same time, because these FTAs are not here and gone tomorrow. They will last for longer, and they can then think about capacities from that perspective. That's one. Second, in terms of, I think enough is talked about in terms of, we have heard about China plus one ever since COVID happened, right? If we do a reality check, we'll find that the impact of that, companies switching production has been limited. So I think, and so this tariff will not also drastically all of a sudden present that opportunity that, you will start becoming very competitive, etc., just on the back of a tariff. Inherently, I think we have to look at the things about the comparison of the costs compared to, let's say, China and some of the other countries. Looking at the supply chain and logistics, which is a very, very big challenge in India compared to not only the Western countries, but China. I think it's order of magnitude different. Third is in terms of the quality levels, right? I think it's still, we have not reached that level where Make in India provokes the sense of the same thing which made in Germany or made in Japan used to bring, right? Whereas China, it's changing on significantly changed that. And last but not the least, the delivery capabilities of, whenever you take orders, how do you deliver on time and in full across continents is a game that Indian companies have not mastered so well, right? Partly because of logistics, but partly also because how you organize yourself and how you manage things on the ground from a sales and distribution standpoint. So I think these are the key factors that one has to take into account. The companies which take advantage of these, whether it is the macro or the three factors I mentioned, namely the cost, the logistics, supply chain, and the quality and delivery capabilities, I think will be the biggest beneficiary of this. And those who are unable to do it in a short span of time will not be able to do it. The last point is, there are a lot of product white spaces, right? For example, in the chemicals industry, we can clearly say, okay, fine, one fine day China is, stop supplies from China. I think if it stops, it will disrupt a lot of industries which are using the chemicals that are including but not limited to the FMCG sectors and all other sectors, for example. So where are those product white spaces, right? How can Indian companies fill those product white spaces and invest a bit of money in the indigenous research and development rather than just depending on borrowing technology from the West? Unless these things are taken care of, I think a lot of these things would remain as an aspiration, which will possibly not be realized in the immediate term. Only a few of the companies will be able to do it, is our view. And those who do it will have a significant impact, competitive advantage over other Indian companies and possibly over the global companies as well.
You mentioned about the China plus one strategy, which has been this buzzword last 1 year probably. But do you think some factors which are still holding back the Indian companies in terms of scaling up their production? Because the scale which the China has and the scale which India has, this is a phenomenal difference. To reach to that level, still there are some factors which are contributing, like we're not able to grow to that stage. So which are those factors which India can tackle to reach to this? Of course, it will take a lot of time to reach to the scale which China is producing. But I think we are on the way to do that. But the gap is so wide. To what exactly is to be done for Indian companies to scale up their production? Which are the factors which are like holding them back?
Yeah, no, I think that's a very good question. And this will also be dependent on sub-industries in terms of which will be able to do that. And the level of difference in terms of scale is so huge that, honestly speaking, we compare there's no comparison actually, right? I mean, we don't stand anywhere with respect to what they have been able to build. But I think the things go down to the basic factors of production, right? At the end of the day, namely the land, capital, labor, and technology, right? And if you look at all of these factors, we should ask ourselves whether for Indian manufacturers, is there an advantage right now? We the cost of money is one of the highest in the world, right? So if by the virtue of getting that kind of financing, you are at a disadvantage of paying your interest charges or paying to the shareholders, etc. Land, we all know what's the situation, right? And land does not mean anywhere in the world. Even if you build SEZ, are they connected to the ports? Are they connected to the sources of supply? Those things are well thought out, right? And it is not there right now. The cost is high, the location is a disadvantage in many cases, right? Uh, um, cost we talked about, so I'll not drain it again, right? Uh, Technology, right? I think the Chinese companies have gained that kind of, self-reliance where they don't need to depend on the import of technology from the West for most of their production. So that way, I think that gives them the flexibility to expand faster than what other companies in the world can do. And it is across industries, whether you talk about heavy industries like steel or chemicals, or even some of the other process industries. You see that they have that edge right now. So I think and this is credible how they have built it, right? At the end of the day, both the countries were at the same stage around 1980, right? They are where they are versus where we are, right? And the important thing to note there is the support is from all around, right? It's not despite the policy, but it's because of the policy that they flourish. So this is a very large topic, and I think suffice it. The realism will say that we will not be able to bridge the gap in the very near future, at least, or in the near future. I think it is also borne out by the fact that India manufacturing as a proportion of GDP is just 18%, right? And there are no examples of other developing countries which have moved from underdeveloped to developed without manufacturing reaching 45 to 50% of the GDP. So it's not, we jump directly, and hence the large chunk has remained untapped. But I won't plate that gloomy picture. All I'm saying is that this is possibly a great opportunity for us to rethink and focus on the fundamentals. Last point on this one is the product white spaces. We don't do a lot of things that China does. Hence, where is the money of R&D going currently, right? If the product white space is there, doesn't matter whether you have an import of 300% or 500%, right? If the sources are there, they will always have to get it from there, right? So we don't have that level of every industry. I have seen that there are big product white spaces gaps that are existing. How can we fill those gaps? By basic research and development, and the government supporting that in a big way. So these are the factors, I think, and I don't want to say in any negative manner. I just want to say that realism combined with action is what is needed by the Indian companies.
Correct. So, Mr. Raghavan, what do you think? Whatever Vinod has put forward in terms of the macro level and overall perspective on the Indian manufacturing. So,
no, Mr. Patek has put it correctly.
Yeah.
I think
so
we
making
should
China
not shy
plus
away. Yeah,
yes.
We should not shy away from telling that there's a big gap. It will not be possible, and we should not think about what's not possible to do, but make an attempt to come closer to bridge that gap.
Yeah.
There are a lot of things on product. I mean, from my industry, I can only tell a couple of things, and I had done a fairly deep study, spending a couple of weeks last month as well in China. They get a 13%. If you really do item to item to item cost, the cost difference is not more than 10 to 12%, which is not much when they're 10 times our size, right? But one scheme they have very nice, I think Mr. Patek can sort of maybe knowing it and concur about it. See, they give a lot of recognition to companies that innovate. There is a scheme where if I am an innovative company, I can apply and if I am certified by the government, my corporate tax comes down by 7 or 8%. And that's what they put back on innovation. The companies that I uh, respect there in our industry spend about 7, 8% on R&D. And what do we do? Nothing, really less than 1%. And because this is what they're saying. The second, 13% export subsidy, right? So they are actually selling at cost minus 3% and still get a 10% net profit on their product. These two are major differentiators which encourage companies to do. So the scheme is also not only to look at the industry, the way they looked at the industry, they have looked at critical industry, identified them, made a roadmap of them in China 2025, or that paper that has been made is very exhaustive and very futuristic. And within those industries, identify companies and promote them. Right? There's a very focused approach, which we will not be able to do being a democratic country, probably, because there'll be too many people pointing fingers at if government goes to help any company as such. So these are some of the big disadvantages, but I believe everything different from China and India is the risk-taking capability and the courage of those people, which we as industrialists don't take, right? Um, in our industry, which is such a mature conventional industry, where all the leading players in any of the countries would not be less than 40 years or 45 years of existence, the top Chinese companies are less than 10 years in existence, right? So they've done all that in last 10 years. So there's a huge change in the attitude, the belief, the courage, the risk-taking ability of the individual, and the support from the government.
If you're talking about the government support, how can the Indian government proactively support the manufacturers just to, especially to mitigate this?
It is a it's a uh, thing that people should look at a long-term thing. For example, I think Mr. Patak pointed out this as a land. Okay. What is the difference? We have a factory in Germany. The land is absolutely free. There's no value for land there, right? If I had to buy a 10-acre land here, pay 7 crores, 8 crores an acre, and in the German factory, there's no capital cost on land. I can put that money on better equipments. I buy a mother machine to machine our components there, spending 2 million euros. Today, I mean, I can't think of that in India because I spend so much on land and building. So I keep thinking, how do I buy a cheaper machine? If you buy a cheaper mother machine, your end product will be cheaper, lesser this thing, on a quality, and the end product goes on quality. Land is a major deterrent in our country, right? A simple thing that government can lease land and tell the companies that you repay on a ballooning, you also grow and you also give more back to the government, probably would be the only answer that we can come out of it. Second, flexibility of labor. Right? It's not that everything is hunky-dory in all those Chinese companies. Many, one of the companies, they're running on Sundays, but people were not paid salary for 2 months. But they know that something will happen and they will be given or whatever it is. And the management is free to give a flexible timing to the workers. Workers stay in the premise. We don't have even a labor, this thing that you can have a hostel inside the campus. There's no absenteeism there. There's nothing called an overtime there. I mean, of course, they pay a little bit, but there's a lot of flexibility in the labor thing. As industrialists, we should not misuse the law. We should respect the labor, protect them from social costs, etc. But on the other side, there should be flexibility to improve the productivity. These two are the major things that differentiators between both the countries. So it's difficult to sort of come closer to them. Maybe a good attempt to move closer. I think the most important is on capital goods. You can get better end products of any engineered thing or any consumer thing if your capital goods sector is strong. You take any country, if it was Germany, its capital good industry was strong, right? It was innovative. It's normally 4.5% of the GDP of that country. Normally, the growth of a capital good industry is 1 percentage point over the GDP growth of that country. America had a strong capital good industry. That's where the manufacturing was good. Once the capital good industry went out, the manufacturing fell. Korea, Japan, Germany, whatever we take, we have to strengthen our capital goods. If we make good machines, if we have better power transformers, if we have efficient, textile industry, textile machineries, the industries that use those machines would produce quality products, and that's how the whole cycle works. But we not spend enough time as a country on capital goods industry. It is very small, so the government focuses. Obviously not there because the revenues are smaller from
Vinod, would you like to add your inputs in terms of the government supporters? What policy adjustments or say the trade agreement should India pursue to strengthen the manufacturing sector?
Yeah, I think Mr. Raghavan has covered it very well, and I think as an industry leader, he's gone through those things, which we as consultants can look from outside only, right? So I think it will be difficult to add the depth that he has said. I think I would just say that all the government can do is to simplify things, right? And I think it's Make in India should be an outcome and not an input, because if you have these factor cost advantages, Make in India will happen, right? And I think the point on labor is known for many decades, right? And I think post-liberalization also that needs a very different change. We have both the situations. We have situation of our labor laws restricting the manufacturing companies, and we also have situation when labor is not well protected despite having all these difficult laws. So I think those simplifications need to be done, and within our overall democratic institution, which also has considerations about what will be accepted by the larger masses, etc. I think one has to measure our optimism on that, but it is something that definitely has to be done. I mean, just anecdotally, I'll say that I was talking to a mid-sized entrepreneur who was setting up a factory in Delhi NCR region. And, after 2 or 3 years, he said, look, I can just simply give this land to a real estate developer. I'll be better off. My life will be simpler, right? And I'll get as much money. So you see, that is where the fundamental is, right? In terms of, and the, all the points in terms of recommendations that Mr. Raghavan said, I completely echo that point. In terms of, if we don't do it now, I think things will, this policy, this tariff thing will come and go, right? Things will not change. And the most unfortunate part of it will be that it's very, very clear that if India has to develop that progress towards a developed country, I think there's no way we can do it without mass employment, and which only manufacturing can supply. Even in the new age, I think still needs more manpower than a lot of other industries. So anyways, I was just augmenting, but I completely agree with the point that Mr. Raghavan said.
Okay, so just the last question. What should be India's strategic messaging to the world, positioning itself as a stable, scalable, and competitive alternative to China? So, Vinod, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I think those messaging already exist, that it's a democratic country. It's one of the world's largest markets, right? It also has the tech talent which the world is needed. Although China has shown that it also has tech talent with DeepSeek and others, right? In that space. So I think those messages need to be augmented. And I think it's very important to show some success by actually saying, let's say somebody's not like the companies which have stood with a lot of capital investments but had to face 20 different windows to get the get the approval. So how can we showcase those examples, real examples, where multinationals can talk about, let's say, having set up things which went, which will then companies will factor in their advantage. Otherwise, the general perception is it's a very difficult ease of doing business. We don't need to repeat what our standing is globally. So that examples will definitely hold. Second, I think, is the individual country to country agreements, which are, I think, unlike the global trade system, it is giving way to more bilateral systems. So I think how can we instill confidence in each other and create those advocacy or support groups in those countries for clearing that. And last, do something about the basic policies in terms of not just labor, but everything in terms of simplification, which can make the land, labor, capital, uh, more more amenable to the growth of manufacturing sector, rather than just being something which is more of a constraint than a support. Great. So some of these factors would like to highlight, and I think there has to be a very big campaign. If we understand that, look, we as a country, 2047 or whatever year you take, if say this is mission critical for the development of the country, and then lay out what are those 20 major things that we need to do to solve for the Indian manufacturers and exporters, of course. Then I think a sense of urgency is what I'm trying to say. It's just you can take 20, 40, whatever we take. I think those symbolisms apart, I think it is important that we set up a firm deadline for getting those and showcase that to the world in a more in a clearer form. So that's the only thing that I can highlight. Highlight, but I'd like to listen to Mr. Raghavan, his comments.
Mr. Raghavan, what do you say? What should be
Thanks.
the
I think Mr. Patel covered very well, but I just wanted to add a couple of things that the nation pride is also one thing. I've seen China 97, 98, 99. I think it was worse than what India was at that time. There were broken roads, and our roads were better in Faridabad and Noida. But they never shied away from speaking about the aspiration that I want to be the manufacturing hub, I want to be the manufacturing chain. They used to go, I've seen them making presentations in global arena, talking about it. Yes, they became a butt of joke for, bad quality, came up a step, but they worked hard on that, and nobody can take that out from them. And probably we should do that from government down to every industry leader, talking more about it, but not make it only a propaganda thing or just a superficial talking, but genuinely being more, talking more about it, showcasing more about it, but at the back end also improving the process. It is not that you just do everything for marketing, but don't do on the backside. Within our own industry, see, I just give one example every time somebody asks this question, is Korea doesn't import very many machines. Very few machines Korea imports into their country. Is Japanese machines not better than the Korean machines? Are Germans not better than them? But they take only Korean. A Korean tries to buy only Korean unless it's absolutely impossible to do. Will an Indian manufacturing company do that? That, okay, I'm ready to work with a fellow Indian company. Maybe he's not good enough today, but we will bring him to global standards. I think if we answer that question, probably we will make some progress in creating an ecosystem for manufacturing. And it is now all that is an ecosystem. I mean, my product would be as good as some of the components going into my product. If one of them is not good enough, my product is not good enough. So how do we create a whole ecosystem which is high on quality, high on delivery? We are fairly good. We are not so bad that our starting point is not there. I mean, in some of the engineered products, China's starting point was still lower than us. But they could do, and I think if we put in that effort, we can do. It's not a difficult task, but the gap is very. I mean, as
Yeah,
Mr. Patek said earlier, I think the point is be realistic. Yes, we cannot beat because there are a lot of stories, a lot of headlines that people make. We will compete with China. Let's forget that. China has its own story. Let us build our own story, put a target for ourselves, and let's try to meet that. Probably we
yeah,
will be able to do that.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's perfect. Like just to put an end comment, I will say India has the required abilities, the required strengths, the manpower, the favorable industry environment, barring some exceptions, which you already mentioned about the land and labor. But still, we need to project ourselves to the world that we have this and that we are capable of producing goods and exporting it from here. And as you rightly mentioned about the ecosystem, individually, many companies are doing really best in India. But if you take the ecosystem, that's probably lacks some kind of collaborations or partnerships. Automotive industry probably is the best example that they have built the ecosystem as per their requirements. Likewise, other industry sectors have to take into consideration of building the ecosystem, and then we can think of reaching to the level of the China scale. So currently nobody is stopping us, and probably the tariff structure and the global supply chain disruptions and trade is giving us opportunity to do that. So probably let's work together, build the ecosystem, and then invite the world to invest in India and make India as a global manufacturing hub. So thanks to both of you. You really put in a lot of really real perspectives, ground perspectives, which probably help the industry know about their strengths as well as weaknesses. And going forward, we can expect that India should be the manufacturing powerhouse of the world. So thank you very much. It was pleasure interacting with you, and we look forward to interacting with you again.